In this tutorial, we're going to return to modeling with subdivision surfaces. We're going to begin the process of modeling this chair, and the first thing that we're going to do is model the leg. Seems like a pretty straightforward object, but if you're new to subdivision surfaces, polygon modeling in general in Blender, this will be a good tutorial. Our starting point is a file where I've basically set up some profiles as a kind of template. I'm going to press Shift and S and return the cursor to the world origin. Press Shift and A. Let's add a plane. We want it to be aligned to the view. Pressing the N key brings up our parameters, and we notice that we have rotation applied because we did a rotation to view. Press Command A or Control A and remove that rotation. Now, let's come in and press the Tab key. And let's just go ahead and move the whole thing up roughly. 2 key takes us into edge mode. I'm going to select this bottom edge, and I want it to be exactly at 0 along the y-axis, so it's resting on the screen line. So over here in Item, I can just come over to Z and 0 that out, and it moves that up for us. The next thing that we need to do is switch over into vertex mode and align these a little bit more closely. If you're new to Blender, Blender has modes that can be a little bit confusing if you're not used to this. Right now, I'm in the Move tool, and the Move tool is going to adjust the selected element that I have, which is this single vertex. And I can simply come over here and grab and move that. That works pretty well. That's pretty easy. If we come over to the opposite side, we can do the same thing over here. But let's say that we're really in a place where we're wanting to move things as quickly and efficiently as possible. I'm going to come up to where it says drag, and we'll switch over to tweak mode. And what that does is it allows me to click, hold, and drag in one operation and move that vertex. So I don't have to click and then click a second time. But I want it to be constrained to the y-axis. So press the Y key, and then I can move that in one fell swoop, one operation, one click. So it's really nice in that sense. Click, hold, and drag, and I can move that right down. So this is what tweak mode is really good for. You can, at any point, use the widget, or you can just drag directly on the vertex. So let's do this. Click, hold, and drag, and move that to the corner. We'll zoom in to make sure we're a little bit more accurate. There we go. So that's a really good use for tweak mode. Let's press the K key. So currently we have a single polygon. That's our starting point. Come down to the bottom, click, and just drag up until you match that template line and hit return. Do the same thing over on the other side, K, come to about right there, and come to there, click, and return. And then we'll do it one more time over for here, and we'll generate that and hit return. So we've gotten it pretty close. I don't think I need to really come in here and stress too much about it. If I needed to, I could come in, press the 2 key, select this edge, for instance, press the G key once and the G key a second time, puts this into slide mode, and I could slide that up if I wanted it to be very precisely aligned to that template line. But I think this will be just fine how it is. We need to come in and remove this polygon in the middle. Let's switch over into face mode. Press the X key to delete that. Now we want to turn our attention over here. The way that this is constructed is that we have an angle here where 2 pieces of the wood are joined together. So we have a piece here and a piece over here. Switch over into vertex mode, and we want to select this vertex and this vertex. Since we're in tweak mode, we don't have a marquee selection available to us. So hold the Shift key and select both of those. Bring up the context menu and then invoke Connect Vertex Path, or Pair in this case would produce the same thing, but I like this because it's the J key. Now if we press the 2 key to switch over into edge mode, I'm going to select those 2 edges, and then we're going to dissolve those edges, remembering in this case to have dissolve vertices selected. In fact, let's come over to the other side here and let's do the same thing. In fact, I'm going to turn off the profiles just temporarily so we can see these. I'm selecting both of those edges. I just held the Shift key, bring up the context menu and do dissolve edges again. But see what happens here is now that removes the corner. So this is a case where we want to deselect that, but now we need to come over into vertex mode and manually deselect those. So this is a good case where there's not an option that's going to take care of both conditions for us at the same time. So we'll do a dissolve vertex. Okay, now we don't want to immediately connect here because we have a rounding in this area. So let's come over and turn back on our profiles. I've marked generally just the curve area that I want to be there. Select this single vertex. We want to come up to the vertex menu and then invoke bevel vertices. Just begin moving the mouse and you'll suddenly see, you'll know when you're in the right direction because it'll just suddenly sort of move and change like that. Roughly match up to the template, but let's change our segments to 6 because we want that rounding just like that. Okay, so leave the shape at 0.5, and this is going to work well. We don't need too many more than that because we are using subdivision surfaces. Now, this is where we're going to take these points here, and we want to actually match up to a point on either side of the corner. We're going to have a bit of rounding around here that the subdivision is going to take care of that for us. So press the K key, come to that vertex, and then come roughly about where my indicator line is right there. Hit return, K key, and do the same thing right about there to there and return. And so this is going to produce a constraint here. So the subdivision comes up here and then it rounds around that corner. Let's come down to the bottom. We're going to come back up there, but let's now add a cut line here. This indicates where wood is up here and then down here is a metallic component of the chair. K key, we'll just click here to here, return, and let's move over to the other side. Do the same thing. K key, and we'll put here to here and return. So let's turn our attention back up over here. What we need to do now is produce a boundary. The chair itself has a little bit of rounding around these corners, and we need to inset some geometry that's going to produce that rounding for us. Switch over into face mode. In fact, let's come over here and turn off the profiles. Press the A key to select all of the polygons, and then press the I key for inset. Sometimes that tool can be a little bit weird when you're zoomed way in. You've got a lot of geometry selected in other parts of the model, so just be patient as you kind of find where that movement point is. So come in till you get about like that, and I think that'll work pretty well. Click. So we've produced that boundary. And this is important because we have an n-gon right here that we want to dice up, and subdivision surfaces can handle n-gons. This is something I've talked about in other tutorials. You'll frequently hear people say, you can't have n-gons in a subdivision surface model. Well, in fact, you can. But there is one condition that you want to be very careful of. The condition that allows them is when you have planar regions. That's the most common area. And we're going to be having a large planar region all around this flat area. Okay, so this is all going to remain flat, which gives this freedom in how we configure it. But we do not want a concave n-gon. That's one condition you always want to resolve before you move on. Since I have a central point here, I can match that up. So press the 1 key and select this vertex, hold the shift key, select this, and then just press that J key to connect down the middle. Now, again, we want to continue dicing this up, and we're going to end up with triangles. So this is the other thing that people say is you can't have triangles in a quad-based subdivision surface mesh. Well, in fact, you can just fine. And again, because we're in a planar region, that gives us freedom to do that. Invoke the K key for the knife tool. I'm going to click here to here, and then back to here and return. And we've diced that up into triangles. And we've anchored them right here. So we have the boundary polygons here and the boundary polygons here. Everything in between, we can basically do what we need to with it, and it'll work just fine. So let's do the same thing here to here. Okay, that works really well. Let's turn our attention over here. There's going to be a very slight rounding around here. Come into edge mode, double click, And then we're going to switch over to the bevel tool. Now let's talk about this for a minute. If you're new to Blender, it can seem a little bit confusing if you're watching tutorials and somebody is moving through really quickly and just saying, press Command B, press Command R, Alt S, and they're just barking out keyboard commands. We have icons over here where you can directly access a tool, but you can also just press a keyboard command to access the tool. And what can seem confusing is the fact that I'm in the Move tool, but I can access the Bevel tool by pressing Command B. Well, you can also press Shift and Spacebar, and it gives you this overlay that shows you many of the modeling tools that are available, along with the keyboard commands to invoke them while you're in another tool. And so let's do that. Let's come over here and press Command or Control on the PC, Command B to invoke this tool, and we get its default value, or whatever the previous value is that you happen to set. When I click, we get options here where we can set this. But it may be that you actually want to have a different set of values initially when you interactively work with the tool. So let's click and then undo. If instead of invoking the tool via the keyboard command, we come over and directly select the tool, so we're specifically selecting the tool, come to Bevel, we get options that we can set in advance of invoking the tool. In this case, I want to change the segments to 2 and the shape of 1, and then we get this. We get this behavior. And that's what I want to see in advance. I want to see that interactively as opposed to having to release the mouse button, establishing the value, and then changing parameters after the fact. Okay, so this is one of the reasons why I like to specifically use and invoke the tool as opposed to the keyboard command sometimes. So I'm going to click to establish that, and let's come down now to the bottom, this area. I'm going to select this, and now I'm going to press Command B, and it will use the values that I just established by directly selecting the tool. Click, and then we'll come over to the opposite side, double click, and then in this case, we're going to repeat the last command with its values by pressing Shift and R, and then click to establish that. Let's come to the bottom and look in this area. I actually want to reconfigure this. So we're going to use the K key. We're still working two-dimensionally. And when we actually add thickness to this, we're going to want this to be reconfigured because right now it'll produce sort of a rounded, ill-defined shape at the bottom. So press the K key, click here, and then come all the way over this way, and then press the Y key and click and return. And then do the same thing over here. Click, Y key, and then click again and return to validate that. Now coming this way, we want to kind of establish the existing edge that we have. Click up here, and then we don't want to click here, but we just want to keep going and watch what happens when I get right over that edge. Do you see how it temporarily changes to the red? That means we're in perfect alignment with that angle. So click and return. Let's do the same thing over here. Click here and then come down until you see that turn red. There we go. And then click and return. Select this edge, hold the Shift key because we're in edge mode. Select this edge, context menu, and dissolve those edges. In this case, we don't want the dissolve vertices option enabled. So let's do the same to the other side really quick. Let's do this. Now, I could do this in one operation, right? But I don't know exactly where this edge is, and I'd kind of like to preserve it. So we'll just come over and tap the Y key and click and return, K key, click, Y key, and then click again and return. And then we'll do the same thing here. Click here and then come down until you see that turn red and click and return, K, and come down to about right there until you see that turn red and hit return. And then select both of these. I'm simply holding the Shift key down, context menu, and then dissolve edges. And there we go. So we've reconfigured that bottom area. And I actually think that maybe I'd like this loop maybe to be down just a little bit closer. Press the G key once. Now I'm in the bevel tool, but we've just invoked the move tool. We haven't shifted tools, but Blender allows you to access other tools while you're still inside of another tool that you happen to have selected. But the variant that we want is actually slide. So press the G key again, and this takes us into slide mode. And I'm going to take it down about half of that distance. So let's come over here, do the same thing. Let's practice that. Double click, G, G, and then pull that down until we get about half distance. And I think that works pretty well. We're ready to give this thickness now. So we've done a lot of preliminary work to get this ready. 3 key to go into face mode. And let's kind of move around until we can kind of see this like at more of an angle. Press the A key to select everything. We want to do a general extrude. So press the E key, and we're just going to go, it's going to be intelligent, and it's going to detect that we've got all these flat faces. So it's basically going to go in a normal direction to those. So just pull this out until we get some degree of thickness about like that. It doesn't need to be exact. In fact, press Option Z, Option Alt Z, and you can see that thickness a little bit better. Let's come down to the bottom. Let's rotate down to the bottom and look here. So we want to produce a single loop going all the way through the center of this. So let's just come over to the loop cut function, click once, and that will, I always like to default to the move tool for some reason. That's just the way my brain works. Okay, we want that one loop going down the middle. So that works really well. But let's return our attention back to the center of this bottom pad area. 3 key, or just directly select the move tool. Now I'm in Tweak. My eye always kind of looks here to make sure I know what tool I'm in. You can manually select it, or you can also just press the W key to cycle through until you get the selection mode that you want. Hold the Shift key and select all of those. But it does switch specifically to a selection tool. All of the tools down here can also select geometry, and they can also have their own selection mode. It is a little bit confusing in my mind, but it is the way that Blender works. Press the I key and then inset just a little like that, and then press the X key to remove those polygons, remove the faces. So let's come over. We're not going to see them, and it's going to make it easier for some of the things that we're going to be doing. Let's do the same thing here. Hold the Shift key, select those, and then press the I key, inset, and then X, and delete those faces. Let's come in now. We want to be in edge mode, and it gets to be a little bit hard to select things. That's why I like to select a single element so I can rotate. Make sure, let me just show you this if you haven't done this. Make sure under Preferences, under Navigation, Orbit Around Selection. Boy, that is so useful. Zoom to mouse position is one that I also have selected. Just make sure you have those two things on. So useful. I'm going to double click to select this center edge. Here's where you may want to use another feature where we use the cursor. I'm going to place the cursor right about there. See, when I try and rotate now, it's looking at the center of the selection, which is way off screen, and it's hard to rotate the view around where you want. Place the cursor there, come over to View, and then invoke the 3D cursor. You may get lost for a second. And this actually, this drives me nuts, the way they've engineered this. Now, what I can do is kind of zoom back down to where I am, but you can see now it rotates around the 3D cursor. I can hold the Shift key. Let me come back to the Move tool. Hold the Shift key and double click to select that. So I've got both of those selected, but I don't want, now I need to move the 3D cursor. So let's move it down there. So I'll just click right there. So now I can rotate around there. Hold the Shift key to deselect those edges. Those we don't want selected. I'm going to turn off 3D cursor, and let's zoom out and come to the other side. Hold the Shift key to deselect those two. Now, let's come into the side so we can look at this. So we're looking basically left to right along the x-axis. Is that I want to move these up along their normals. Remember, the normal is basically, you can think about it as a 90-degree direction to a surface, but edges can also have normals, and the normals are going to allow us to move this edge basically away from the plane that they sit on right now. And the tool for doing that is the shrink fatten function. But we want to be able to do this. I'm going to press the N key to turn that off. We don't have an easy way to select the widget that would normally appear. Let me pull way out. The widget is way off screen, and I want to do this in a more precise way close to the geometry. So this is where we would switch over to active tool mode, and active tool will allow me to simply click, hold, and drag on an existing edge and pull up. So what we're doing is we're going to give the outer edge curvature, a little bit of curvature. I'm basing this geometry model off an actual piece of geometry that I observed. It has, around here, it has this rounding to it, this subtle but noticeable rounding. And that is what we're modeling with moving these edges up and off like that. But now when we come back and look at this from this side, we have some areas down here that we want to deal with. Let's come back over into the vertex mode and let's zoom down. We want to get this leveled up exactly with the bottom there. So this is where I like tweak mode, because I can just click, hold, and drag and kind of move that up, and I'll move it right to that position. Press the N key. I want it to be exactly, let's come up to item, along the Z axis. I want it to be exactly flattened there so I can move that so it's exactly at that location. So you could also press the G key and move it up. So that's another thing that you could do, is just press the G key and move that there. And Z, we have the widget because we have that tool selected. It's why I actually tend to like to come back to the move tool. It's just a methodology thing. And right here, I want to move this up so it's basically in alignment with this. And I can press G once and then G a second time, and that puts me into vertex slide mode. Let's do the same thing over here. G, drop that down. There we go. So we've sort of corrected that. Let's come up to the top here. So that tool did the same thing up here. The algorithm works in such a way that it didn't produce exactly an even distance here. So I'm just going to tweak it. I'm going to move it up like that. It's not super critical, but it does allow me to get that corrected. And let's come over and look at the other area here. So we have kind of the same thing. Let's move that up. And then here, I can just grab with the tweak tool and move that down. See how easy that is? And let's come down here and do the same thing. Again, tweak mode. I can just, let's do this first. I need to select that. So one click, GG, and I'll pull that up into alignment. GG, we'll pull that into alignment. But in this case, it's not going to work with the GG because it's going to slide along that edge. So I will first move this into place, about like that. And then here, GG, and I can slide. So click, hold, and drag because I'm in tweak. So Blender has these sort of multiple layers of being able to manipulate the geometry. Okay, now you can see there's some slight variance down here. It's not a big deal. I'm not going to spend too much time getting that perfect. Let's come in and look at this transition area here. All of this is going to be a metal, and everything above this area is going to be a wood. And there needs to be an inset in this area. Let's switch back into face mode, hold the Shift key, and double click to select both of those. This is where pressing the I key is a fast and easy way of doing an inset. Come in about like that. But then we're going to switch over. We want to specifically, of all the extrude types, we want to be an extrude along normal type. But to make this easy, we want to switch over to Active Tool, and that just allows me to click, hold, and drag on any of the selected items to do that extrude operation on. So let's come over and do the same thing to the other side. Shift key, select both of these, I key. Now I tend to pull the mouse away. The closer the mouse is to the center, the less precise the operation is going to be. So I key, and then we can sort of pull that in. And then in this case, since I'm in the extrude along normals function, but I'm in tweak mode, I'm just going to take advantage of that widget, and we'll pull that in about like that. And I think that works pretty well. We're pretty much ready to apply a subdivision modifier to our shape. So let's do that. Let's come over and apply generate subdivision surface, and let's take it up to a value of 2 for interaction. Let's come over into the side view, and we're going to look at this, and it's going to look kind of messy and weird at first, but there's a lot of logic to what we've done. So one of the things that we haven't done yet is we haven't produced bounding geometry for this curving area coming into this long straight area. In fact, this is going to be our prime consideration now, is controlling the subdivision between curving areas and planar regions. When we look at the subdivided model, we can see a lot of squiggly lines going on. These correspond to the boundaries of the cage mesh. The cage mesh is what we've been modeling, and the subdivided geometry, which is sometimes called a limit surface, is what is being represented here in these squiggly lines. This right here corresponds to this curve. Now we can turn off optimal display and see the actual geometry, the polygons. So let's do that. Let's actually work on this. We're going to come up here first off, and we're going to note that we have got thin polygons here that are being subdivided into these long polygons, and it's carrying curvature with us, which is making it ill-defined. So double-click this edge loop, hold the Shift key, and double-click this one here, and then come over to where it says mean crease. You can type in a 1 here, but when you're learning this, it's actually kind of fun to do this interactively. Press Shift and E, and we're going to start mousing, and you can see this happening interactively. And what it does is it prevents the child subdivided polygons from these parent cage polygons from passing that boundary, and it concentrates the polygons where you want them to be to produce concise, perfect curvature just in that region. We want to do the same thing here. So I'm going to press the K key, and I'm going to add new loop right in here. So come to about right here, click, come up so that you're roughly perpendicular to that line orientation. Press the C key so it goes all the way through our 3D geometry. Click, hit return, and you see how it reset that. Let's do the same thing over here. K key, come about right there, pull into there. Make sure you press the C key so it goes all the way through. Click and return. If you don't do the C key, it wouldn't have done the back side. That's what the C key does, is it projects it all the way through. Now, we still have this issue where this polygon is being subdivided and its child polygons are actually blending into the child polygons of this long polygon. We want to prevent that. We want the curvature to be concentrated where it needs to be. 2 key, double click, and then let's just come over to mean crease because this is easy to access it. You type in the 1 key, and that resets it so that the subdivision can't pass that boundary. So we'll come over here and we'll do the same thing. There we go. So let's come down and let's do the same thing down in this area. Let's come into the side view so we can look at this carefully. Let's come down to the bottom and sort of work our way up. We're in edge mode. And again, I kind of like to see this interactively. Press Shift and E. That's the same as bringing up the context menu and doing an edge crease, just so you know where that command lives. And then begin mousing to the right, and you can see those just snap in place. And you just want to make sure that that factor is 1. And you see that over here too. So let's just come up here. And now, since we've established that via the Command E function, double click here, hold the Shift key, double click here. We've got this very thin polygon that is blending into these longer polygons, and it's pulling curvature there. So press Shift R to repeat the last command. Okay, so let's come over to the other side and do that really quick. Down at the bottom, Shift R, because it has remembered the last commands. Double click, double click. So if you want to see it, I mean, it's fun to see it. Press Shift R and then begin mousing. You can see that happening interactively. And then just make sure it's 1, and that's what you need to do. Got one more right here. So let's do this. Here and here. Let's look at this. Press Shift and R. Boom. See how that claps that into place? We've got these perimeter edges. Remember, early on, we did an inset to produce these boundaries. So these boundaries function to constrain the curvature around this area from pulling a lot of the curvature into this flat area. So this flat area is remaining flat because of these boundary polygons. And that's the primary consideration of why I put them there. But now we're really going to reinforce it by double-clicking here, hold the Shift key, double-clicking here, and let's do this interactively so we can see this effect. So Shift E, and then just begin mousing. And there we get those snapped exactly into place. And that prevented any curvature so that this planar region is perfectly planar. So let's come around to the other side and do it on the other side. Double click here. In fact, this is where you can turn on optimal display. It certainly does make it a little bit easier not to see all of those polygons. Shift E, and now you can see the relationship. It's going to be, you have to do this a little bit more with these big selections. And there we go. That snaps into place. We have 1, and we see the 1 right here also. So now we've got this pretty well constrained. Let's come up here. The selection mechanism stopped here. It hit a fork in the road, and it just stops when you're doing a loop select. So for instance, if I double click here, it only does 2 edges because there's a fork in the road and it doesn't know where to go. So hold the Shift key and double click here, and then just press Shift R to repeat the last command, and it applies those creases. So let's do this on the other side. Shift R. See how much more ordered that looks right now? Okay, there we go.